sorry. Thank you. Yeah, so welcome to writing your docs in your IDE in AsciiDoc Primer. My name is Alexander Schwartz. I'm an IT consultant at a company called MSG. I'm also part of the AsciiDoc working group. Actually, I'm also on the steering group, on the steering committee there. I'm very happy to serve there to promote the use of the AsciiDoc language for writing docs. Right. So this will be today's talk. I will shortly talk about the motivation, why to use AsciiDoc in the first place, and what the alternatives are. I give an introduction to AsciiDoc as a language, and also a demo then of the AsciiDoc syntax and ecosystem and what you can do using this, using this language. And finally, a summary why I think AsciiDoc is a good thing to use in projects, and what are then the key benefits to take away, why you might want to use it. So what do you use to write docs? Well, you can use some Office tools. So they're very good in sharing documents in terms of you can take an Office document, put it into an email and send it over to somebody, or put it on a drive. You can print it. You can work on them offline. That's also very good, but Office suite tools are very bad when you want to merge changes from different participants, or if you want to store them like in a Git repository and collaborate on them as a group of people. On the other hand, I see people using wikis quite a lot. So wikis are very good to collaborate on. So people can see who changed what over time, maybe also browse into history. But actually, you need to be online to change content on the wiki. It's not so good to work with them offline. It's difficult to share things, especially when you're not in an open source environment, very open environment, that you can't just share a link to a Confluence, maybe, if you're working cross-organizational. It's also not very good to print stuff from a web page. You won't have the layout that you might need to hand over documentation to a customer. Maybe you're targeting PDF there. And while working in the wiki in a standard way is also not very good putting things in a Git repository. And only once things are part of a Git repository, you will have a proper version history. You may be able to version things with your code and have your code review techniques or code review processes that you already have in place for code, as I said, that you can use for your docs as well. But well, if you aim for a continuous integration delivery setup, then we want to have everything as code in a continuous delivery setup. We want to have text there, we want to have diagrams, we want to document our APIs, we want to have code snippets, we want to search documentation, we want to publish to a website, we want to track all the changes we print. We want to have printable documentation at the end of a build pipeline, maybe on a Jenkins or Travis CI or whatever a continuous integration server you might be using. So all that should be automated and should start with code committed somewhere on a Git repository. And well, this is where the AsciiDoc language comes into play. So AsciiDoc is the language, and AsciiDoc is one tool chain to transform a text file written in AsciiDoc to a HTML, to a PDF, to a wiki, to a website with documentation, what we will see today. So AsciiDoc, the idea is that you have frictionless writing, you use your IDE, your text editors that you like, and just write plain text files. And plain text files go very, very well with version control systems, with Git, but also with all the other version control systems that you might have. If you're using Subversion or Mercurial or something else, they all treat text files very good, and it allows you to merge changes from different branches, from different contributors. It is very good. AsciiDoc is also a language that is feature-rich for technical documentation. So it's been inspired by DocBook. DocBook is very, very complete in this kind of way. So we see we can do chapters, lists, tables, everything that we need is there for technical documentation. And well, it's now about 15 years old, alive and kicking. The ecosystem has grown over time. And as of 2020, the standardization process is started at the Eclipse Foundation. So while there have been several AsciiDoc implementations, the aim is of this working group at Eclipse to have a real standard and probably also a compatibility suite, so that all the implementations that there are that want to be compliant with can follow that standard, and that you can then interchange it even better than they can today, that you can interchange a text file that you've written for and test it with one implementation, that it will also work with another implementation. So this is also the logo that we have in the upper right corner here. And below that, that's then the AsciiDoctor logo. And AsciiDoctor is one tool chain to create, for example, HTML files and PDFs from AsciiDoc files. It supports also DocBook or an EPUB and all the other tools or several other output formats that there are. It's an open source implementation. It runs on Java, Ruby, and JavaScript runtimes. Actually, it's written in Java, but also runs on, sorry, it's written in Ruby, but also runs on Java and JavaScript. And well, it can also be integrated in Gradle builds, on Maven builds. So this is, I would think, a quite broad spectrum that we have here that you can cover. If you have a build pipeline, it will most likely fit in if it's built on Ruby, on Java, or on JavaScript and the different build tools. But well, we have writing text, as we see, is one thing, but you would like to have a live preview when writing things. So there's an Eclipse plugin, there's an IntelliJ plugin, there's an Atom, and Visual Studio Code and Brackets and all the other editors that there are. There is most likely to be a plugin that will render a preview in your IDE. I myself am contributing and being a maintainer of the IntelliJ plugin for AsciiDoc. Right. So lots of the examples I will show when use IntelliJ in this talk, but I will also show the Eclipse plugin. There's also a live preview that you can plug in into a browser. So once you open a browser like Chrome, Firefox, Opera, you can install a plugin that will render a text file fully rendered AsciiDoc style. Or there are standalone editors like JavaFX that you can use. But now it's time to really dive into the syntax and the ecosystem. I actually shared a link that I would ask the moderators to share also with all the participants now, that you can follow along. So if you don't want to install an IDE and just want to give it a little start, typing in a browser and seeing some preview on the right, you can click on that link and open like this view during the talk and try out a little bit of AsciiDoc in a browser before you add it to an IDE. If you're using Eclipse, I had it open. This is how the same output would look like in Eclipse. You need to install an AsciiDoc plugin from the Eclipse marketplace in order to make it work like this. You have your outline of Package Explorer. You will have a text editor that shows how a structured document looks like, a title, some headings, lists. In the middle, you get a preview, and it will show you how this rendered output will look like, and an outline so you can jump between headings and everything else there is. And this is then a view that will look very, very similar in all the different IDEs. I'm now jumping through to an IDE in, where is it? This is not what I wanted. Too many open IDEs, sorry for that. There it is. So this looks quite similar. This is again an article layout. Again, I have a headings, I have the preview here. This is very common to all the IDEs that there are. And you can get support on each of them. Okay. So as I said, you can do each sentence, well, it's just a line of text. A blank line between the sentences creates a new paragraph. You can mark things with asterisks to make them bold and give them in italics. And right. And again, this will render like this in the preview of your IDE, or if you create HTML out of that or a PDF out of that, it will work. And the idea is this basic text formatting, it would work like if you would write an email, it will render it in a nice layout. You can do format also paragraphs. So all the syntax or the layouting you might remember from an O'Reilly book, that you have admonitions here. If you mark something to be important or a tip, you can put icons in front of a paragraph. You can show them as examples. You can put in listings and all that. Typography that you need to write a proper book on IT stuff, then you could do that in an AsciiDoc source code document. It's also great to do tables. So this is now a bit more complex table here, but you have a table title. You have columns that you can define in their width. So you have two smaller width columns, a bigger column here that's 3 times the width of the first two. I want to add formatting into that column as well, and I have the same AsciiDoc formatting here in the cell, and to format that like I had in the preview in the previous simple formatting example. So now I think it's time to switch to the IDE, so we can show some more live things here. So as I said, a live preview. Once I start typing here on the left, on the right, the preview will update as expected. If I want to add a new column in here, I can do that as well. So I have now another column and another cell. So, and this is very important that I can do this as text, because now everybody who will then later on look into the history of this file will see what I added to this document and what other people did then to re-edit my content. And this can also be part of code reviews. I can use images, like an inline image within a line of text, or as a separate kind of paragraph, like a full width image. I include them as well. So this is very nice. Something where AsciiDoc really shines is when you want to include examples from a real code that you've written into your document. So a standard include would look like this. I include something from a file that is on disk, maybe just a full source code file, but usually you don't want to include a full source code file. And what you can do then, you can add some comments, like a tag where it begins and an end, to wrap just this system out println in here. Also give it a nice call out as it's here. So this is how it looks in the source code file. And I can then make it to include just this one line of text that's been tagged here, and output that into my document. I have a call out here that is used to be a comment in the source code file. It's going to be rendered like a 1 in a black circle, and the output, and then I can have a description of this call out just after the listing in my document. So this is just very handy to write technical documentation for developers. And you suddenly have examples in your documentation that actually compile and work, and then maybe even tested by unit tests. And that is very, very, very nice. If I want to convert this to a PDF, I can do that as part of my build pipeline, or maybe some editors also offered to create a PDF from the IDE itself. So yeah, this takes a second to create. Okay. I probably should have tried it before. Oh, there it is. Yeah, so again, the preview that I've seen before as an HTML is now created as a PDF. Right, again, syntax highlighting and call outs is all part of the PDF being created here. So that's really nice. Okay. One of the examples, like one of the bigger documentations that you might come across that are also based on AsciiDoc, is the EclipseCon documentation. So if you go to this documentation here, it's a fully built documentation website with search functionality, with outlines. You can navigate between these. You can also, yeah, there's only one version here, but you can also, so if there are different versions, switch between the versions. You have different guides here. And all that is, well, backed with a Git repository. If you click on this here, you're going to be transferred to the Git repository and fork this repository and do the changes. What I did here as well, I opened up the J documentation in, this is now IntelliJ with the AsciiDoc plugin. You see here, they defined all the keywords and page and the nav title here. They're doing comments in here, IDs to reference different parts. All the includes that are here work, so I can jump to the content that is included in here. I see a preview. We have examples here. They're including from from different contents. So you can, as this example shows, as I see it, you can write really proper documentation here. Also bigger projects with all the referencing includes all that elements you need to write to really set up a documentation project that supports the software that you're delivering to your customers. So this was images. You can do also diagrams as text. This is planned UML, but I skipped this now for time reasons. And this is again the example with includes from a source code snippet. So as I said, AsciiDoc promotes collaboration, deduplication, and automated publishing. You will have a better chance of up-to-date and correct content as you collaborate as a team and via version control. You have consistent content across different documents. You can use includes there. You can publish both to HTML and PDF, and also to a documentation site we've seen with EclipseCon. And you can focus on delivering new features that are then at the same time documented in the documentation, because you will have a continuous integration pipeline both for the code and packages you deliver, and you have a continuous documentation pipeline that creates the website with the documentation and the PDFs, whatever else you need to publish together with your source code artifacts. Again, to remember, AsciiDoc is the language, and this is being standardized at Eclipse in the AsciiDoc Eclipse working group. There's also the link at the end. Please join the discussions here. The working group is still getting started. And the AsciiDoctor is the implementation. So that gives you a chance to create HTML, PDF, and everything else there is. These are the links. And I would say now, let's dive into the questions. Okay, moderator tells me 1 sec with the questions, right? So these are the links. You say right now the Eclipse AsciiDoc plugin is a single person project in spare time. Do you envision this to get some more drive with the specification being moved to the foundation, or are implementations rather not affected by that change? Well, that is what you describe is true for the Eclipse plugin, and it's also to a very much extent true for the IntelliJ plugin. It lives with the contributors, but I know that the Eclipse plugin and also IntelliJ plugin and all the other plugins around there are open for contributions. So I don't think that the working group will sponsor these implementations. So this always needs to be done, well, by individuals, by companies who support them by adding code. As the ecosystem grows even further, there might be then more people contributing. This might help them. I'm not sure. Yeah. There are at the moment not so many financial sponsors, so no people working full-time on the plugins. Maybe this will change with other big companies joining the Eclipse working group, but let's see. I can't put my bet on that. Put it this way. Question number 2: how does AsciiDoc compare to alternatives, so such as REST, Sphinx, and others? I, for my part, have done in some places Markdown, and I found that for technical documentation and all these cross-references, including stuff, doing proper tables, I prefer AsciiDoc over Markdown. With REST and Sphinx, I didn't do too much documentation there. I contributed to some of them, but I think when you come from a Markdown, you will find the AsciiDoc syntax quite similar, and I was not so familiar with when running into REST and getting all the macros done there. So what is that browser plugin called? Do you have an URL? Right. Yeah, there's an URL called AsciiDoc editing AsciiDoc with live preview. There's an URL that's given in the if you go to this site notified here, you will find a list with all the things that are here. The link that I shared during this call is just a very personal experimental trying so that you can try out some AsciiDoc during this talk. If you want to join in, please contact me on GitHub, and we will try to make that even better than it is today, this editor. This is just a rough prototype to get you some, I would say, some first hand-on experience without the need to install an IDE. Will there be language tool support for multi-document output, for example, multiple HTML files rather than a single one? Is AsciiDoc the multi-page? So multi-document output, if you want to do that, I would recommend Antora. The standard AsciiDoc output will only be a single document, but with Antora, in the example of EclipseCon I, this is multi-page HTML, and this is then probably what you would be looking at when you want to do AsciiDoc. Question number 5: is there support built in or via some extension for Eclipse help plugin output? Sorry, I can't help with that. I would ask you to post that question on the AsciiDoc or maybe AsciiDoc mailing list. Question number 6: does AsciiDoc provide listing syntax highlighting for custom languages, not only the mainstream one? There's highlight.js. I think there's several highlighters around, and the most flexible one would be probably highlight.js if you're targeting HTML, and maybe you could write then syntax highlighting for that as well. But I've never done custom language syntax highlighting. Question number 7. Is there built-in support for splitting input across multiple files, like a preprocessor include? Yes. So the include that I used to show how it worked with listings, you can use the same include to include also subchapters. And subchapters, I think you can include, I think, to the level of 20, if I'm not mistaken. Right. So there are more questions. Question number 8. If I want to migrate some existing plain HTML documentation to AsciiDoc, is there some tool support for this? I've never had to do that, I have to say, but people have done it. But please do ask that question on the mailing list of AsciiDoctor. Does the TOC, table of content generation, is part of the AsciiDoc tooling? Yeah, this TOC generation is part of the as part of both AsciiDoc and Entora. So on the G website, let's see. So the table of contents on the right is being created automatically from the outline that you have in the document that you're currently browsing, and you will have the syntax highlighting here on the left. And the navigation on the left is then just another AsciiDoc file where you define the order of navigation that you want to have here. Question number 10, is there a way to integrate inline charts from text? Yeah, that would be planned UML and AsciiDoctor diagram. There's an extension for that that I would recommend. Is there a way to verify code examples? Are not deprecated with AsciiDoc. With JDoc. So the code, the Java code that you want to include would be unit tested and have your normal check style, for example, on it, or whatever checks you want to do. And this works fine. And at least the IntelliJ plugin will show if you're using a deprecated AsciiDoc syntax. So that might answer question 11, at least a little bit. All right, time's up. Thanks for joining today. Handing over to the next speaker.